Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Leah Zimmerman. She is the founder of Stepping Stool Coaching and makes hard conversations easy. Her expertise around being an educator, theatrical performer, life coach, and family business, that all helps us in her doing making hard conversations make easy for all of us. Welcome to the show, Leah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome to the show, Leah. You are welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit, especially businesses, as we'll be discussing about how one can change their conversations for business growth. So first to Leah, to understand, about hard conversations, you make hard conversations easy. Help us understand about, nowadays even conversations are becoming difficult with humans, from human to human. I want to understand what are these hard conversations, around whether business or in life, and then we'll come to the business part of it.
Okay. Well, a hard conversation is any conversation that you're going to find hard to have, or when you're in it, that you're finding hard to have. And it can be different for different people. So for some people, often it's a hard conversation because there's emotions you're going to come up with. You're going to have to face difficult emotions that you don't like. You're afraid that you're going to make someone else feel difficult emotions. You have to deliver bad news. You have to give a correction to somebody. You have to tell somebody to do something differently, or you have to share your anger, or you're upset about something and you're trying to figure out how to do that. That's your emotions. There's things that trigger in other people's emotions. Those can make things hard. Talking about money is often very hard. That makes things really hard. And talking about things that matter to us really deeply. So talking with family in conflict, sometimes not even in conflict, but trying to figure out how to talk about the things that really matter in a way that makes it impactful, can make it hard. And then most conversations are, even if they're not super hard, can be made easier. Conversations can become more impactful. So when we're having a conversation, this is the way we're having a relationship with somebody. The conversation is the relationship. And if we're not getting what we want from a relationship, then there's something in the conversation that's not allowing us to make that happen. Everything in business happens through people. Profits come through people. All of that happens through conversations. So if we want more profits, there's something in the conversations that isn't working, we need to do something different. And that often can be hard because we don't know what other conversations we could be having. So that is another thing that makes conversations hard, is that we only know how to have the conversations we have experience having, or that other people have had with us. We don't always know how to create new conversations. Conversations will have a different result for us, whether it's in our family, in our relationships, or in our business. So that's some of the things that I would say make a conversation hard, the number of different contexts, but they're related to what's hard for us.
Right, Leah. So as I said in the beginning, nowadays we are not having enough conversations.
Yeah.
Are conversations hard in anything, either in personal relationships, at the workplace, or even in business? Is it because we are not having enough conversations on a day-to-day basis, and suddenly we are trying to, talk about things, even small things will become, full of emotions, full
Yeah.
of difficult conversation? Why is it that communications become
What?
hard?
So what makes it hard? Why does it become hard? I think there are always a lot of different reasons that are making things hard, and it's really different in the context. But we're right now living in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty, and we are already anxious. And one of the things that makes us more volatile, harder, and more reactive in our conversations, and more afraid to have conversations because of how other people will respond, is the not being able to predict whether we're going to be able to self-regulate it, or whether other people will be able to regulate. We're not sure. And when we are anxious, And when we're showing up in go mode, I'm going to do this and do this, we're not paying attention to how we're receiving people or the energy we're bringing. Conversations are a lot about energy. And if we're carrying a lot of negative energy and negative emotion and a lot of judgment, that's going to affect our conversations. So I think they're harder right now. If I was going to say why they're harder, it's because there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of judgment, a lot of volatility, and we're already a bit on edge. And so we make other people around us on edge. And so conversations get harder. I don't know that they're harder than they've ever been, but I think some of the things we need to talk about are more complicated than they've been before. And so we don't have a precedent for how to have those conversations. And I'd say that would be the second thing that I think is that there are some conversations that life is changing so fast. There are things we need to talk about and be able to talk about that we don't have a precedent exactly for how to talk about them. And so that's what I would say to answer the question about why now, what makes our conversations now hard. But what's hard is also still relative to different people. So when I'm starting to work with a client, what's hard for one client, sales might be hard for one client, how to have an impact and how to be able to talk about money and how to be able to have the conversation but not feel sleazy and pushy at the same time is hard for one person. For another person, that's easy. But figuring out how to say something to an employee or help them move forward and do something different is hard. Or it could be that those conversations are great. They're functioning fine at business, but they go home and it's totally different there. Most people, it's more consistent. And this the thing that's hard in some places, hard other places, but even then it's still different. Some people, what's hard is saying no. And for other people, what's hard is figuring out where they can be more flexible, where they can say more yes. So it also depends on the person.
Right, Leah.
Yeah.
Is it because we have our own sets of expectations, or we try to keep the result in our own minds out of before
Mm.
going into a conversation, whether it's personal relationships, uh, any other relationship? Is it that because of that, or the lack of empathy, also about the other party? Why?
Well, those are
How
all really
should
good points. Expectations impact our conversations, the expectations we bring. And I'd make the distinction between the expectation and the intention. When we come, for example, into a conversation expecting that someone's going to argue with us, we already come in ready to argue. We've already got our dukes up, metaphorically. And they're already responding to us that way. And then we react that way, right? Conversation is about how we're pushing energy. So we have conversations that are really boxing matches, and we have conversations that are tug of wars. And if we anticipate that that's what the conversation is going to be like, then we're already showing up a certain way. But if we set an intention that what we're going to do in this conversation is we're going to connect, what we're going to do in this conversation is going to listen. What we're going to do in this conversation is listen to the truth and what the other person has to say. What we're going to do in this conversation is shift the energy. So when the other person shows up like this, I'm going to be bigger and calmer. I'm going to make space for them. That is the distinction that I'd set. And an intention's a kind of expectation, but when you set it as an intention, you're more aware and therefore you have more impact in what's going to happen in the conversation. Whereas we have a lot of implicit expectations. And when we go in with those, we create those expectations. And then there was another thing that you said about empathy. It is very hard to have empathy for other people, depending on what's going on for us. So the one of the things that's very hard in a difficult conversation is that we're fighting for something, but we haven't always become aware of what we're fighting for. We're fighting to be heard. We're fighting to be right. We're fighting for self-respect. We're fighting to make a point, to see the things go in business the way we think they should go. And we haven't taken the time always to think about what's at stake for us, what we're fighting for. And then if we know what we're fighting for, it's a lot easier for us to show up with empathy, to listen for what the other person's fighting for. But when we haven't thought about it, we're just in there fighting. And if we're fighting, we don't have space to create empathy for other people. But in order to have a productive conversation, we need to know what we're fighting for, and we need to have some understanding of what the other person's fighting for. And that's when we can say, okay, this is what I need. And then what I'm trying to create in this conversation, this is what you need and you're trying to create in this conversation. Now let's set a common goal together. That would be like in a negotiation, is also what you need to do. And so it's hard to be empathetic and empathic, or empathetic, let's say, when you are fighting. When you are triggered, your nervous system is on a defensive mode. You're protecting something. You're protecting yourself from feeling put down, from feeling weak, from feeling humiliated. Then you're going to be protected. And if you're busy protecting yourself, you don't have room to find empathy and where the other person's coming from. So empathy is a challenge, but a lot of why it's a challenge is because we haven't prepared for our conversations, and we are not practiced in showing and thinking empathetically about other people. And there are also things that trigger us that make it hard. We're so busy with defending ourselves or protecting ourselves or making sure we get what we want that we're not able to find the empathy for others. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, yes,
That was really
yes, indeed, Leah. I'm trying to grasp as much knowledge as possible, and I'm also trying to think of different aspects for my audience. How exactly
yeah.
is it because So how do we make these hard conversations, so-called hard conversations, make them easy? Is it because a lot of people look at rather use the word conversation, but actually they are negotiating? They are looking at negotiations because this conversation has been in their mind and both the parties have been thinking. That's why they keep on so many pent up emotions in their heads, that when it comes to actually having a conversation, it is not a conversation. It is more of giving justification. It is more of negotiations. It is keeping all the proofs and everything in
Yes.
front of them.
Yeah.
When you have a conversation, when you talk, you don't keep so many things in your hand while you just talk or listen. How do you within this, and suppose you give a lot of leeway or room to the other person, even if you are a very good person, you will think the other person will take it as your weakness, as they do it in negotiations, and get away
Yeah.
with it. Then later on you'll realize the point, and the other will think, oh, I put the strong point there, because there might be other people also, and you will think, oh, I should have spoken about this. So it all becomes on losing your losing all that trust and all. How do you then in this situation, how do you look at having a hard conversation, making it easy, either
Yeah.
at the personal front or in the work front?
Okay. So there are a lot of things inside what you said, but every conversation is some kind of negotiation of a relationship. And however you show up in that conversation, you're going to make someone else feel that they're playing a certain role in the relationship. So some people will show up to the conversation deliberately trying to dominate, right? So they want to be in control in the conversation. This is not a very effective way to have a conversation. And you may be in a conversation with someone who wants to feel that they're in control. How to do that, I'm not going to talk through specifically for now, but is recognizing, the first step is just recognizing what's the role you're showing up in this relationship and what's the role that you're seeing the other person in the relationship. If you would prefer to see the other person as a collaborator, show up as if you're somebody who sees them as a collaborator. Show up as someone who sees the other person with respect. Show up as someone who sees the other person and trusts them. If you show up in a way that's already casting the other person as someone you can't trust, as someone who you think is trying to be in control and dominate, they're going to feel that. And they're going to react to how you've just cast them in the relationship. So the first thing is to understand that what's really happening in a conversation is a relationship negotiation. Now, sometimes it's easy, it's just transactional. I'll give you this, you give this to me. But in almost every human interaction, we are very aware of ranking, somebody being status a little bit above us, or someone being status a little bit below us. If you are fighting to have a higher status than the person you're talking to, it's going to not be a very good conversation, because they're not going to feel so good in that conversation. You're trying to show higher status. if someone's doing that to you and you're going to fight back against it, you're going to have a hard conversation. Sometimes it's okay to just go, oh, this person needs to feel status. Let me show them respect. I don't necessarily think they're a higher status person than me, but that's something they need. I can show up in a way that helps them feel that I respect them, that I notice and accept their status without demeaning myself. This is what I think is tricky in one of those types of situations where someone's domineering or in control. So recognizing what's happening in a relationship and then making space. The hardest thing, but the thing that changes that's all conversations, is to create some space and realize that you don't have to speak so fast. Listen. And the tools that I suggest, I call them AAA. We have a company in the States that's called AAA for Emergency Roadside Service. If your car is stuck on the side of the road, AAA company is the one who comes and will help tow you, take you where you need to go. So AAA is use the memory tool that I use. The first of the A is acknowledge. When somebody says something, say back what you just heard. It slows the conversation down. It creates space around that thing. And if nothing else, it tells the other person you got it. You heard them. It can be very simple. So I heard you ask the question, what are ways we might make conversations easier? I remember that's exactly how you asked it, right? But what is the person saying? Acknowledge it. It's really simple. I see, I hear, I notice what you said. I got it. I acknowledge it. The second A is affirm. Oh, yes, you're right. That sounds hard. If it's emotional, you want to empathize or validate. Oh, I can see exactly why you'd be concerned about that. So you're saying that I turned in my reports late and you're getting really frustrated about it because it's costing us time and it's putting the company behind. I've just said it. I get it. And I validate that that's also what's going on for you. The third A is appreciation. I really appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Now that it's at my attention, I can really do something about it. But I really appreciate. We don't share appreciation enough. We tend to share, and depending on the culture where we live and the energy that we are connected to, we tend to share more criticism, more negative thinking, because that's what's going on in our own brains. When we start using AAA for ourselves and for others, we start to have an easier access to more positive things we can say to others. So we can say, I get you. I see you. This was a tool that when I discovered it in my 20s, when I was teaching, working with students, was huge. My classroom management became so much easier because I didn't have to tell them, you're doing this wrong, or sit down, or fix this. All I had to say is, I see you. I see that you're standing. And the student realized that I saw them. They sat down. I didn't have to do anything. And when people feel seen and heard and understood and appreciated, the whole everything changes. So those are the tools that I would suggest first, is become aware of what's happening in the relationship. And these are the tools that can help you shift to make sure that you are showing up as someone in the relationship who is going to see the other person, who's being safe for the other person, who's respecting the other person, who's really listening and caring about what the other person has to say. Now, to do that does not mean you're giving up strength and showing weakness, which is the thing most people want to cover up. It may feel vulnerable. There's a difference between when we feel exposed, doing something different, using language we've never done. Showing up with kindness is heart. That means we're showing more heart. It can feel uncomfortable when we're doing that, but there's a lot of strength and to have the courage to step into the uncomfortability. And the thing that's really hard, and why I do this in my communication lab, I run on a monthly basis to help people practice, is because when you see other people do it, you get the idea. And when you have the experience and the impact it makes, you realize that what people see is the courage. So if you feel, oh, I can't do that, Leah, that's just too much being seen. Saying I appreciate you to somebody, that feels too mushy, too touchy-feely. But saying I thank you and saying I appreciate can feel awkward, but having the courage to step in to do it and just acknowledge somebody, they see the strength. They don't see the vulnerability that you feel. And I call that the vulnerability paradox. So that, I'd say that's the biggest obstacle. And the third piece, uh, the relationship, the AAA, and understanding that vulnerability, that discomfort that will come up from feeling a bit exposed is part of it, and that the courage is the part that most people will see. And all of this is what I call turning the spotlight on other people. When we have the self-consciousness on ourselves, what are they thinking of us? Who are they? Why do they think I don't know what to do with my work? They think I need the directions. They think I wasn't good enough at this. This is the spotlight on me. This does not help with a successful conversation. Turning the spotlight around on other people by using the AAA system helps make the conversation go a lot smoother. So I hope those feel like usable tips that can help people start to decode their conversations and show up with tools that will help them go more smoothly.
Absolutely, absolutely, Leah. You talk about, to change one's conversation to grow their business. What are these conversations? How do I change my conversation? In business, you talk about buying and selling and just all. So, how do I change to something else? What is it that I need to change?
Well, that can really depend on the person, but we speak sometimes to be heard instead of speaking for impact. What's the
Okay.
thing the other person needs to hear us say that's going to make a difference and move them towards action? If I'm trying to sell something and I just want to talk all about how great my product is, I have no idea if that's going to make the other person move forward. But if I have a chance to listen to them and I understand their needs and I understand their wants, I might be able to give an answer or be able to share something that, whoa, that helps them see something different. So if, when we think about how do we speak in a way that helps people open and trust the relationship with us, but also open to more what ifs, open to more what possibilities, what else is there. And in that way, in business, I think we would benefit in general a lot more to speaking to people's imagination. What if it was possible to do this something together? What if this future that you want for yourself was really possible? In business, that's often what we're selling. We are selling something to somebody to help them feel like they can become something, someone else. I'm selling communication tools and leadership tools and transformation that will make life easier, more peaceful, more profitable, more harmonious. So I have to speak to the person and what that would mean to them. I can tell you, I could talk forever about the things I could do, but they're not meaningful to somebody for me just to talk about. So in business, it's really being able to know how it's going to be meaningful for the other person. And it's the same when we want to improve performance. So many managers and supervisors, when they're facing difficult conversations or have to have conversations about the performance gap, come in with the correction. Why are you doing this? Don't you know this is not the way to be doing this? They come in with the thing that's wrong. This does not improve performance because it's not impactful. It makes the person who's speaking feel like I told them what was wrong. I exercised my authority. Now they should fix it. But for a person who's receiving that, that's not an easy thing to receive and work from. What's more impactful is clarity over what you want them to do and helping them ask questions that make them go, oh, okay, now I have to do it that way, or giving them the mentorship and support they need in order to improve where they need to go. Those are more impactful conversations. So there's different tools depending on the kind of impact, but it has a lot to do with understanding who the audience is. What does success look for like for them? And how do you help them see the direction towards going there? And when you can do that in your conversations, business flows a lot easier and your profits come a lot smoother because you're not struggling and fighting through your conversations to make other people do things. By pushing, you're creating impact and influence with ease because you're more aware of where they are, and your conversations are helping them go from here to there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Tell us a bit about, stepping stool coaching so that, people can know and also
Oh,
connect
thank
with you.
you. Well, I got the name Stepping Stool Coaching because When children are growing up, we want to help them be able to reach things by themselves, like being able to reach the faucet. And so we give them the stepping stool. And they, by stepping up, they can reach for more things. It's really important, I think, to understand that nobody needs a lot of fixing and coaching. Everyone just needs a stepping stool, something that will help them get to the next step where they can reach the next faucet, where they can reach the next thing. So that's what I named my coaching company. And there are a number of things that I do. I work with people one on one, long term, to change their conversations. I work with business leaders and CEOs and advisors. I work with family businesses because there's a lot of hard conversations inside family businesses. Exit planning, succession planning, these are hard conversations. But not everyone's ready to work long term. And I have a number of smaller, easier offers, and they're all on my website, steppingstoolcoaching.com. And the thing that I think is the most helpful that I want to make sure people check out is my communication lab, because that is where I create an experiential opportunity to play with some of these different ideas and see how you can become and feel a more empowered communicator by gently trying things out and watching also how it impacts others. The people who've come through my communication lab have said it saves them hours. They come in with a major conflict in their mind, and within a few hours, it's decoded, it's clear, they know what to go say, and all of that worrying and stress is gone. There are people who've come not clear about their messaging, and because of the communication and the conversation that happens in that space, they have clearer messaging. There are people who have come needing to have more confidence, and my background as a theatrical performer also helps me coach people's physical body and ability to show up in a way that gets attention, as opposed to showing up in a way that signals to other people I'm weak and I don't feel confident, and tends to get people to look down on me. So these are all some of the kinds of transformations that happen. And the beauty is that everyone can be coming in for their own. They don't need to all have the same thing. But because we have a space, there's something about the way people work together and impact each other and empower each other that's very transformative. And that's something people can do once in a while, one off, and does not have any commitment to being ongoing. And is also found on my website, steppingstoolcoaching.com.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.